The snow began quietly. On the morning of December 24th, 1886, it did not arrive with drama or warning. It drifted down as if the sky itself had grown tired and decided to rest. Each snowflake fell alone, unhurried, settling on frozen fields and bare fence posts like a careful hand placing linen on a table. The Harper family noticed it first through the kitchen window. Mary Harper stood at the wooden counter, slicing potatoes for the evening meal. Her movements were steady, practiced, the kind that came from years of repetition rather than thought. Outside, the pale winter light softened as snow dusted the ground, turning the earth quiet and clean. "Snow?" she said gently, not as a warning, but as an observation. Her husband, Thomas, sat near the stove mending a leather strap. He looked up briefly, eyes moving to the window, then back to his hands. "It was due," he replied. "December always finds a way." Their farmhouse stood alone on a stretch of open land, miles from the nearest town. Built by Thomas's father decades earlier, it had endured many winters. The walls were thick, the stove reliable, the barn stocked well enough for a season. This was not their first storm. Still, something about the air felt heavier than usual. Their children, Anna, 12, and Samuel, 8, sat near the hearth with their school books. Anna traced letters slowly, her mind already wandering toward Christmas morning. Samuel stacked small wooden blocks, listening to the faint whisper of snow brushing against the glass. By midday, the flakes thickened. The world beyond the windows faded into a soft white blur, as if distance itself had been erased. Fence lines vanished. The road disappeared. Even the barn across the yard seemed farther away than it had any right to be. Thomas rose and pulled on his coat. "I'll bring more wood in," he said, "just in case." Mary nodded. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and watched him step outside. The door closed with a solid thud, and the house exhaled into stillness. The wind had not yet arrived, but the silence was deep, unnatural in its completeness. Snow swallowed sound. It pressed the world inward, making the farmhouse feel like the only place left. By late afternoon, the sky darkened too early. Snow fell sideways now, pushed by a wind that had finally found its voice. It crept into cracks, piled against doors, and wrapped the house in cold patience. Thomas returned with wood and news. "The storm's building fast," he said quietly. "If it keeps this way, we won't be traveling anywhere for days." Mary stirred the pot on the stove, steam rising slowly. "Then we stay," she said. "We've stayed before." They ate supper by lamplight. The children listened to the wind grow louder, its low moan slipping through the walls like a distant song. Snow struck the windows in soft taps, over and over, persistent but not angry. That night, as Christmas Eve settled over the land, the Harper family gathered close to the fire. Outside, the storm tightened its grip. Inside, warmth held for now. And the blizzard was only beginning. That night, sleep came slowly. The wind rose after sunset, not suddenly but steadily, like breath filling the lungs of the land. It pressed against the farmhouse walls with long, patient gusts, circling, testing, learning the shape of the place. Mary lay awake beneath heavy quilts, listening. The sound was not frightening. It was constant, a low, endless voice that seemed to say nothing at all, yet never stopped speaking. Snow scraped softly along the boards. Somewhere, ice tapped against a shutter. Beside her, Thomas breathed evenly, though his sleep was lighter than it appeared. Years of farm life had trained him to rest without fully surrendering to it. In the small room down the hall, Anna dreamed of candlelight and evergreen branches. Samuel stirred once, then curled closer to his blanket, the storm outside becoming part of his dreams. By midnight, the house was sealed. Snow pressed against the doors until the cracks disappeared. Windows frosted thickly, turning the outside world into a pale, glowing blur. The moon rose unseen, hidden behind layers of cloud and snow. Christmas arrived quietly. At dawn, or what should have been dawn, the Harper family woke to darkness. The lamp burned low, its flame steady but dim. Mary rose first, her feet finding the cold floorboards. She paused at the window. There was no horizon anymore, only white. She opened the door a crack, just enough to test the world beyond. Cold air rushed in sharp and clean. Snow stood piled high against the frame, packed firm by the wind. Thomas joined her, pulling on his coat. "We're snowed in," he said calmly. "How bad?" Mary asked. He pushed the door open with effort, snow spilling into the kitchen like flour from a tipped sack. The drift reached nearly to his waist. "Bad enough to wait," he answered. They closed the door again, brushing snow back outside. The warmth returned slowly. Breakfast was simple: bread, a bit of preserved fruit, coffee stretched thin. They ate close together, plates balanced on knees, wrapped in quiet. For the children there was wonder at first. Anna pressed her face near the window, tracing shapes in the frost. Samuel laughed as Thomas lifted him to see the snow piled high against the glass. "It's like the world disappeared," Samuel said. "Just resting," Mary replied softly, "like us." They marked Christmas not with gifts, but with presents. Mary sang an old hymn under her breath while mending a tear in Thomas's coat. Thomas sharpened tools by the fire, the rhythm slow and unhurried. The children played with scraps of string and wood, inventing small worlds inside the larger one holding them. Outside, the storm did not pause. Storm did. Snow fell thicker. The wind changed direction, then changed again, never tiring. Time stretched, measured only by the tending of the fire and the quiet passing of hours. By afternoon, the cold deepened. The stove worked hard, but frost crept along the edges of the windows like delicate lace. Thomas checked the woodpile and counted supplies with careful eyes. "We'll be fine," he said, more to himself than anyone else, "as long as we're patient." Night came early again. As darkness settled, the storm reached its full voice. Wind howled low and deep, shaking the house just enough to remind them of its power. The Harper family gathered closer than before. Mary wrapped both children in blankets. Thomas added another log to the fire and watched the flames climb slowly upward. No one spoke for a long while. Outside, Christmas passed beneath drifting snow, unseen and unheard. Inside, warmth held, but the blizzard showed no sign of leaving. Morning returned without light. The Harper family woke to the same soft darkness they had gone to sleep beneath. Time had lost its usual edges. Without the sun to mark the hours, the day felt suspended, neither beginning nor ending. Mary stirred the embers in the stove, coaxing them back into a steady flame. The wood caught slowly, reluctantly, as if even fire moved more carefully in the cold. Thomas pulled on his boots and coat, then paused. "I'll clear the door," he said. Mary looked at him for a long moment before nodding. She handed him a scarf, winding it around his neck with deliberate care. Outside, the storm had eased, but only slightly. The wind no longer roared, but it whispered, carrying snow in long drifting sheets across the yard. Thomas stepped out into a world reshaped beyond recognition. The barn roof blended into the land. Fence posts were nothing more than rounded mounds. Each step was work. He shoveled slowly, breath rising in pale clouds, muscles moving in steady rhythm. There was no rush. Rushing wasted energy, and energy was something to guard carefully. Inside, Mary kept the children occupied. Anna read aloud from an old book, her voice calm and measured. Samuel listened, his head resting against Mary's side, fingers tracing the edge of her apron. The house creaked softly as the cold pressed in. By midday, Thomas returned, snow clinging to his coat and beard. He stamped his boots clean and hung them by the stove. "The door's passable," he said, "but the drifts are deep. No traveling yet." Mary poured him a cup of warm broth. "We wait," she replied. They spent the afternoon in quiet motion. Mary rationed food with care, stretching each meal just enough. Thomas repaired small things, a loose hinge, a cracked handle, tasks that brought order to a world temporarily out of reach. The children learned stillness. Anna helped with sewing, her stitches uneven but improving. Samuel sat by the window, watching snow slide slowly down the glass, each line fading as quickly as it appeared. As daylight faded, if it could still be called that, the temperature dropped further. Ice formed along the inside edges of the windows. The air inside the house felt sharper, thinner. They wore coats indoors now, breath sometimes visible in the lamplight. That night, the wind returned, not with fury, but with persistence. It found its way through every gap, every seam, humming softly like a lullaby, sung too low to understand. Snow crept higher against the walls, pressing patiently. Mary lay awake again, listening to the rhythm of it all. Thomas reached for her hand in the dark. "We're all right," he whispered. She squeezed his fingers in reply. Beyond the farmhouse, the land lay buried and silent. No tracks, no roads, no signs of life moving beneath the snow. Just a family, waiting together, while winter decided how long it would stay. By the fourth day, the storm no longer felt like an event. It had become a condition. Morning arrived as a dim blue presence, filtering weakly through layers of frost and snow. The Harper farmhouse existed in a pocket of warmth and shadow, wrapped tightly by winter's careful hands. Mary rose before the others as she always did. She moved quietly, not from fear of waking the children, but from habit, a reverence for the stillness that came before the day fully claimed its shape. She checked the shelves. Flour was lower now, beans fewer, coffee nearly gone. She adjusted the plan in her mind, shifting meals, stretching portions. Not with worry, but with calm acceptance. This was part of living where seasons ruled more strongly than clocks. When the others woke, there was no talk of dates or days. Instead, there was only today. Thomas went to the window and cleared a small circle in the frost with his glove. He stared out for a long moment. "The barn's holding," he said. "Snow's packed tight. Animals are quiet." "That's good," Mary replied. "Quiet means warm enough." Anna braided her hair slowly, each movement careful. Samuel sat cross-legged near the stove, holding his hands close to the heat, watching the flames bend and rise. The storm outside breathed softly now. Snow fell without urgency, straight down, as if tired of moving sideways. The wind rested between long sighs. The world felt padded, cushioned, as though wrapped in wool. They found new rhythms. Thomas taught Anna how to mend a tear properly, explaining each step without hurry. Samuel learned how to count time by the fire, how long a log lasted, how the coals changed color before needing more wood. Mary told stories in the afternoons, not exciting ones, not adventures, stories about her own childhood winters, about walking miles to school through snow, about evenings spent listening to the wind while her mother cooked by lamplight, just like this. The children listened quietly, their minds drifting not toward escape, but toward understanding. Night returned early again. As darkness settled, the temperature dropped sharply. The stove struggled, but endured. They moved closer together, sharing blankets, shoulders touching. The house creaked once, then again a slow stretching sound, wood adjusting to the cold. Samuel whispered, "Will the snow ever stop?" Mary stroked his hair. "Yes," she said, "everything stops eventually." Outside, the land waited. Inside, the Harper family learned something older than fear, how to be still without feeling lost. And somewhere beneath the snow, the road remained, patient and unseen. Sometime during the night, the wind changed. No one noticed it at first. There was no sudden silence, no dramatic break. The storm simply loosened its grip breath by breath, like a long-held tension, finally released. Mary sensed it before she understood it. She woke just before dawn, the house unusually still. The familiar moan of wind was gone. In its place was a deep, padded quiet, the kind that felt heavy, as if sound itself had been buried beneath snow. She rose and moved to the window. The frost remained, but beyond it, a faint glow had returned to the sky. Not bright, not hopeful, just present. Thomas woke as she stood there. "It's different," she whispered. He joined her, clearing a small circle in the frost once more. Outside, the world lay frozen and unmoving, draped in white from ground to horizon. Snowdrifts curved gently like sleeping animals. The air looked sharp and clear. "The storm's resting," he said, "maybe ending." They did not wake the children right away. Instead, they let the quiet settle into the house. The stove crackled softly. The lamp flame stood still, no longer bending in unseen drafts. When Anna and Samuel finally woke, there was a change in the way they moved, less caution, more curiosity. Samuel pressed his face to the window. "It's not moving anymore," he said. Anna smiled faintly. "It looks peaceful." Thomas bundled himself carefully and stepped outside again, this time without fighting the wind. The cold was sharper now, but cleaner. Each breath stung and cleared his thoughts. He walked a slow circle around the house, sinking deep with every step. The barn stood firm. The fence posts slept beneath rounded caps of snow. The land felt paused, as though waiting for permission to begin again. Inside, Mary prepared breakfast. Thin porridge, warmed gently, shared evenly. They ate without speaking much, listening to the sound of spoons against bowls, the quiet rhythm of survival continuing as it always had. The day passed slowly, no travel, no digging out roads, just rest. They allowed themselves that gift. Anna wrote letters she would someday send. Samuel carved shapes into a scrap of wood with Thomas's careful guidance. Mary sat near the window and watched light shift across the snow, hour by hour, as if the sun were relearning how to move. That evening, the sky cleared for the first time in days. Stars appeared, sharp and countless, shining with a cold clarity that felt almost unreal. The moon rose over the frozen land, silver and steady, revealing the true depth of what the storm had left behind. Snow as far as the eye could see. And yet, the house stood. Warmth remained. As they settled to sleep, wrapped in blankets and quiet gratitude, the Harper family understood something without needing to name it. They had endured, not by force, but by patience. And winter, at last, was beginning to let go. The next morning arrived gently. For the first time since the blizzard began, true light entered the house, not the dim blue glow of snow-filtered sky, but a pale winter sun that found its way through the frost and rested quietly on the floorboards. Mary noticed it first. A narrow band of gold stretched across the kitchen floor, stopping just short of the stove. It did not warm much, but it changed everything. "The sun's back," she said softly. Thomas stood beside her, hands wrapped around a mug that had known many winters. He did not answer right away. He simply watched the light, as though afraid it might vanish if named too quickly. Outside, the air was still. No wind, no falling snow, only the deep, unmoving silence that follows endurance. After breakfast, Thomas began the careful work of opening the world again, not all at once, not with urgency. He shoveled a narrow path from the door, each movement deliberate, conserving strength. Snow fell away in heavy blocks, packed hard by days of pressure. Anna helped by clearing smaller drifts near the steps, her breath rising steadily. Samuel carried lighter loads, proud of his task, his cheeks red with cold and purpose. Mary watched from the doorway, then returned inside to keep the fire strong. The house, after all, still needed tending. By midday, the path reached the barn. The animals were quiet but alive, their warmth preserved by thick walls and careful preparation. Thomas rested his hand against the barn door for a moment, grateful without ceremony. Inside the farmhouse, the day unfolded slowly. They spoke more now, but still softly. Laughter returned, not loud but real. Small things felt larger. Warm hands after cold work, the smell of stew simmering again, the simple pleasure of sitting without listening for the wind. That afternoon, a distant sound reached them, faint, almost imagined. Thomas paused mid-step. "Did you hear that?" he asked. They all listened. Far across the frozen land came the dull, hollow rhythm of something moving, wood against snow, iron against ice. Not close, but present. "Someone's out there," Anna whispered. "Maybe," Thomas said, "or maybe soon." Hope arrived not as excitement, but as calm reassurance. That night they slept more deeply than they had since Christmas Eve. Dreams came softly, filled with ordinary things. Roads, voices, movement returning to the land. Outside, the stars watched over a world slowly waking from white silence. Winter still held the fields, but its tightest grip had passed. The sound returned the next morning. This time it was unmistakable. A low creak, the soft crunch of packed snow, the steady patience of something moving carefully through a landscape still half asleep. Thomas was already awake when he heard it. He pulled on his coat and stepped outside, the cold greeting him like an old acquaintance rather than an enemy. Across the white field, a shape emerged, a sleigh. It moved slowly, pulled by a single horse whose breath rose in steady clouds. Behind it sat two figures wrapped in heavy coats, their outlines softened by distance and snowlight. Thomas raised a hand, not to wave, but simply to be seen. The sleigh stopped some distance from the house. One of the men stepped down carefully, boots sinking deep. "Harper," the voice called, carried gently by the still air. "We were hoping you'd be here." Thomas smiled, a small, quiet smile that stayed close to the face. "We are," he answered. "We stayed." News traveled slowly that day. The storm had been wide. Farms across the region had vanished beneath the same white silence. Roads had been lost, fences buried, families held in place by weather older than memory. But most had endured. Inside the farmhouse, Mary poured what coffee remained, thinning it with hot water, sharing without ceremony. Anna listened closely as the visitors spoke of drifts taller than men, of nights spent listening to roofs creak and stoves struggle. Samuel sat on the floor, carving another small shape from wood, the normalcy of it grounding him. No one stayed long. Travel was still difficult and daylight precious. But before leaving, the visitors offered what they could: news, reassurance, a promise to check again soon. When the sleigh disappeared back into the white distance, the Harper family stood quietly in the doorway for a long moment. The world felt larger again. That afternoon, Thomas and Mary talked about what would come next: repairs, travel, the slow work of returning to routine. But there was no rush. Winter had taught them a different pace. As evening settled, Mary lit the lamp and watched its glow fill the familiar corners of the room. The house felt changed, not damaged, but deepened, as if it now carried the memory of stillness within its walls. They slept easily that night, not because winter was over, but because they knew how to live within it. The days that followed unfolded gently. Snow still covered the land, but it no longer felt endless. Paths widened little by little. The barn door opened more easily. Smoke from the chimney rose straight into the sky, no longer torn sideways by the wind. Life returned in small, careful steps. Mary resumed her routines with quiet devotion, washing, cooking, mending, each task carrying a softness born from survival. Thomas worked outdoors when the cold allowed, repairing what winter had tested, never hurrying, never forcing the day to be more than it was. Anna began keeping a small journal. She wrote about the silence, about the way time slowed until it felt like breathing. Samuel asked fewer questions now, content to sit and watch the world change at its own pace. On one clear evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the snow with pale gold, the family gathered once more by the fire. No one spoke at first. They did not need to. The blizzard had passed, but it had left something behind. Not damage, not fear, but a shared knowing, a memory of quiet endurance, a reminder that strength did not always shout or push forward. Sometimes strength simply stayed. Outside, winter continued its long work across the land of 1886. Roads would reopen, seasons would turn, years would pass. But in that farmhouse, beneath layers of weathered wood and patient snow, a family had learned how to wait together and how to rest without surrender. And when sleep finally came, it arrived softly, like falling snow at the very beginning of a storm. Not loud, not hurried, just enough.